on that one. So I've always loved stories about journeys, surprising ones, unexpected ones with twists and turns, particularly. We started the service talking about May the 4th be with you, and in a way we might think of stories like Star Wars, particularly Episode 4, where there was a major diversion and Luke had to go and save Leia and go to the Death Star and everything. All of these stories that are complex and just keep us on our toes. There are other stories that may come to mind. Perhaps you can shout out some as well. I think about stories like The Wizard of Oz or The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Think about Finding Nemo, Alice in Wonderland, The Odyssey, Back to the Future with Marty McFly, Up, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Princess Bride, and Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So many others that are basically metaphors, perhaps parables of what it is to be human. Even though they may seem like stories that would never quite reflect our life, they do, if you look a little harder. Because in all of these stories, we find a common truth. Detours and unexpected times of pivot or rest aren't always delays, but sometimes a divine invitation. These detours of our stories aren't always delays, but a divine invitation. This text that you heard from Acts 16 might be kind of an odd text to offer for the third week of Easter, but it has its place. We might ask ourselves the question, why not lean into the appearance of Jesus on the Damascus Road, or the time where he just appeared to the disciples eating breakfast, and in all of these appearances was very loving in his words and very clear about who he was and very clear about what he was asking for all of us as followers to do. But in Acts, it is recorded that Paul's own journey, it really mirrors our experience. Many of us having to follow God's lead, even when we have an experience of presence that is a bit fuzzy or blurry, isn't so clear or apparent to say we are certain that it is true or what it is saying. Traveling through Phrygia and Galatia, Paul and his companions feel the Spirit slam one door after another. You hear it again and again as a pattern. When they had the dream, when they had the thought of exactly what the pathway of their journey and travails would look like, it was put with obstacle and redirection at every turn. Forbidden to speak a word in Asia, and then the Spirit of Jesus didn't allow them to enter Bithynia. And then it comes with a midnight vision, a Macedonian man, not even the voice of God, but a human being pleading, "Come and help us." Maybe you find yourself today with a life and kind of a recent journey that has felt that frantic or filled with surprise twists that have changed the game completely for you. But from that solo line that the apostles and Paul decided to trust and decided to follow, they began a course where the gospel through Paul and others sails for Europe. It's where he eventually found, in our common story, Lydia, and through her and others, the whole course of Christianity began to expand and truly open to the world. The resurrection was made real in people's lives from generation to generation to now, to us. The spirits know, as stark and as confusing as it might have seemed at the time, became the downbeat of a larger continent-shaping, world-changing yes. It reminds us that even the resting places in every human story, or the fallow times where we're having to adjust and redirect for the next chapter, are never empty spaces. In our driven culture, where we often see closed doors as abject failure, this silence or lack of activity or slowness of progress isn't absence. It functions as the room where possibility begins to have air to breathe and to emerge. In a way, for all of our lives, these times of rest are divinely composed pauses that we can't quite see as such, but they let the larger composition of the story of our life together open up. It strikes me that with the apostles in this Acts story, there had to be some level of deep trust in their hearts to even follow what God was saying anyway. Because ultimately, we often have the better sense of the direction that we need to have for our lives, don't we? I know my life reflects that sometimes, that trust or lack of trust. It even comes in this discernment about renewal leave, where those closest in leadership to me know that I began to feel these nudges 2 years ago. But because of all sorts of reasons, first my own pride and my lack of trust, I pushed it away. There's too much going on, too much in motion. I said there just isn't enough for us to be able to go through that kind of time without keeping on pushing forward, without continuing to make progress. It's what our church is expecting. It's what people are expecting of me as your pastor. And what started as a small nudge became a stronger call and a prompting as a need for rest that felt inconvenient but undeniable, and one that I couldn't ignore. And over these 2 years, as the conversations have happened and we have prepared, one of the things that I have come to discover is how safe I feel among this faith community. How much I deeply trust the people here and God's work among you here. You know, just like Carson, this sweet little baby that is among us and could go to the arms of someone he hardly knows, just like he can go to sleep in his mother and his father's arms. There is a level of trust in your heart that has to be there to relax and release in the first place. Rest is trust. And if we look in our lives, we are often filled with anxiety and a lack of trust that we often can't quite see or slow down enough to even name. But I felt safe enough to be able to ask. And the encouragement that I've received along the way from our church leadership to take this time, I can't even put into words the amount of gratitude that I have. And the fact that I also don't take any of it for granted. That there are so many pastors in our community and in the broader United Methodist connection that are afraid to ask. So I commend you for creating the kind of culture and love in our church where we can say the things that we feel and ask for the help that we need. Even as I don't exactly know what the product, if there is ever a product of these times of rest, will be. Maybe the rest itself is product enough. But I'll be sharing a few more words with you through a video later this week to tell you a little bit about what few plans I have, the ones that I have also open to be completely blown up by God, as sometimes they tend to be. But I want to share with you the why and share with you a little bit more about the resources I'm going to be using for this time in the hopes that maybe one of them might be helpful for you in your own faith journey. God's leading is not always immediate or obvious, but all of us who wander off the beaten path for even a little while are not lost when we remain open and ready to listen as an intention to connect to God. To close, I'm reminded of Thomas Merton's words. You don't need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it all is going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and the challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope. Detours aren't always delays, friends, but often a divine invitation. So, like Steve said, I invite you to practice this time of renewal alongside me, not just in staying connected to the ministry of the church, but to claim those places of pause and rest and reconnection for yourselves over these weeks together. Letting your hearts in these times be tuned to God's voice, trusting that God's lead will guide us all into places where we can be his hands and feet in the world when we join back together and begin again. Amen.